This is Judith Lay welcoming you to Manx Radio and to the podcast of this week's edition of At Your Service.
Manx Radio!
What is a vocation? Is it being a doctor, a teacher, someone ordained to serve in the church? And what do you do when you suddenly realise that your demanding, high-profile job isn't actually what you want to do anymore? That's what we're exploring this morning, as once again I am at your service. But first, let's join the International Staff Songsters of the Salvation Army. Their leader, Dorothy Nanskiville, has said, when talking about their ministry through music, "My desire is that through these songs we create a gateway to holiness for our listeners, that we might encourage others to sing together and, most importantly, that we clearly communicate that God is the reason that we sing." Lord, You Are the Song is the title of a recent release on CD and download, and this is the title track. Lord, You Are the Song, brought to us by the International Staff Songsters of the Salvation Army, led by Dorothy Nanskiville. And now let's welcome our first guest today. He's the Rt Rev'd Mark Davies, Bishop of MIddleton in Manchester, who's becoming a regular visitor to the island since he took on an extra job, that of looking after the Diocese of Sodor and Man until the arrival of our new bishop. Venerable Patricia Hillas is presently Archdeacon and Canon of Westminster and will take up her ministry here on the island after she's consecrated bishop in York in October. Until then, the work of the diocese continues unbroken under Bishop Mark's leadership, which mostly happens from his desk in Manchester. But when he does come over to the island, it's a good opportunity to have a chat. Bishop Mark, good morning and welcome back to your island home.
Good morning, Judith, to you and to your listeners. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to have conversation again.
Well, the umbrella topic I'd like to have a little chat about this morning is vocation.
Right.
But I'd like to start with something very personal and very special that's happened in your life recently. And it all concerns your son, Tim. Tell us, please.
Yeah, so with great rejoicing for us as a family, Tim was ordained a priest just a few weeks ago in Bristol Cathedral. And then I had the great privilege of preaching at his first Mass on the following evening. In Bristol Diocese, he's curate in Swindon, very busy, active parish where he's wonderfully happy. Great celebration for us as a family.
Well, first of all, congratulations to Father Tim, and we wish him a long and happy ministry.
Thank you.
Now, did you see this coming? Did you suggest to him that he might consider the priesthood?
No, there'd been no suggestion from me whatsoever. Tim was very active in church life growing up. When I was a parish priest in Yorkshire, he was always very involved in parish life, not least of all serving, but always involved in a range of activities, lots of different things he was always involved with, not just church life, political life, engaging with big issues in caring for the environment, community life. So he had a very rounded, happy childhood. But on one occasion, he came with me to Taizé with our youth pilgrimage that I led on behalf of the diocese. And it was there that he had a very profound sense during one of the Friday evening prayers around the cross. He had a very profound sense of the call of God to ordained ministry. He didn't tell me. We came back home and he made contact with our diocesan director of ordinands, and that conversation began. And then eventually he told me, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Isn't it good that he didn't tell you?
Yeah.
It would have been difficult to have a very natural conversation.
Yes, it's a very different conversation. And he and I, and for this blessing, I'm so thankful. He and I are very close, always have been. And I rejoice in that gift. He's a wonderful son. But he said to me on one occasion, Dad, I want to be Tim, not Bishop Mark's son. And I've got to have that space to have that conversation as Tim Davies. And that was very important and very right. And I came in as a proud dad at the appropriate time.
It must have been a very emotional time for you.
It was for me and for our family. And it was lovely that my very aged but very determined mother was also there. She's a very proud grandmother. And so she was determined to be there despite a number of health issues. And I'm thankful that she was able to be there through much prayer and determination. So that was a proud day for all of us, really, as a family.
And Tim is married, so he's sharing this with his wife?
Yes, he is. Lois and he met at secondary school, one of our Church of England secondary schools. And it was my immeasurable delight last year in Manchester Cathedral to marry them, which again was such a happy occasion, just a few weeks before he was ordained deacon. So we've had a very exciting 14 months as a family and lots to give thanks for. And it's so lovely to see them establishing themselves in their married life together and their home together. And they've got a great gift of hospitality. I've been down to Swindon where he's serving as a curate a number of times. And it's so lovely to see people being welcomed into their home and clearly being loved and cherished as he's loving and cherishing those that he's there to serve.
The last time we chatted, you were talking about the importance of Taizé in your life, this ecumenical monastic community that's become a huge place of pilgrimage since the late 1940s, spawned out of the Second World War and the community's desire for peace. But isn't your son's story just indicative of the power of Taizé? How many thousands of times might that have happened?
Yes,
not necessarily a call to ministry, but a turning point in somebody's life.
Absolutely. And time again, I could give you a very long list of young people who in Taizé have encountered Jesus Christ head on, front and centre. And from that experience of either a relationship with him beginning for the first time, or a reawakened relationship, or a rekindled relationship, or refreshed relationship with Jesus, that from that a number of life-changing things have occurred. So people who are now serving as teachers in the medical profession, as charity workers. I can think of one young person who's doing a profoundly wonderful work with young people going through mental health issues. And that sense of vocation for her began on the Saturday evening in Taizé, where there's a great proclamation of the resurrection. And all of a sudden, the huge monastic church is filled with candlelight, all brought from the Paschal candle that proclaims the greatest news the world will ever hear, that Jesus Christ is alive. He's conquered death. He's risen. And his light flooding the whole universe, and hearts and lives transformed. And she said she had a very strong sense of that light building up in the church and being entrusted to her to carry back and to work that through in her life. Now she's bringing that light to people whose lives are engulfed with a profound sense of darkness. And she's bringing that light and that hope that she experienced for herself in Taizé. It's wonderful, wonderful.
Taste of the prayerful, reflective music that is so much a part of the life of the ecumenical monastic community of Taizé in southern France, a community dedicated to praying for peace and reconciliation throughout the world, and a place of pilgrimage for tens of thousands of young people each year. It's a place that's close to the heart of my guest today, Bishop Mark Davies from Middleton in Manchester. We're talking today about vocation, something that's often thought to mean teachers, members of the medical profession, ministers in the church. But, Bishop Mark, you think it's much wider than that, don't you?
Yes, I believe that passionately, that we mustn't just think of vocation in that very narrow sense of those of us who are called to particular roles and ministries in the church having vocation, but that the whole people of God have a vocation, and it's rooted in our baptismal life. In the moment of our baptism, we're incorporated into the very life of God, Father, Son and Holy Spirit. And from that moment, Cardinal Newman had a beautiful phrase, that each of us has a unique vocation, something that only you can do for God, that will build the church and extend his kingdom. And so that truth for me is something that the church must enable to bear much fruit in the life of every Christian disciple, because we're all placed in particular places at particular times to do a particular work that no one else will ever. Now that might be largely unseen and unknown. It might be something like a telephone call, a letter, a card, an opening of a door with a smile, a serving a cup of tea, a piece of cake, whatever it is, saying a cheery welcome as somebody comes through a door. We mustn't just think of those very obvious ministries that are vocational, but of the vocation, the call of God to be the love of Jesus Christ in action today, and to fill this beautiful, wonderful island with the love of Jesus and the hope that he alone can bring. I'm very conscious as a bishop of those places where, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity, I can go as an ambassador for the church, as a bishop, as a sort of face of the church in a particular way. But I'm very conscious of the thousands of lay women and men who are the Heineken factor, who will get to places that I will never get to, places that will be closed to me because I am a bishop. But they'll be there day by day, week by week, year by year. And they're there as the beating heart of Jesus in that place. Ambassadors of hope. So let's celebrate the call, vocation coming from calling, the call of the living God to all of us as disciples to participate in his mission. It's the mission of God in the island here, in this diocese and every diocese, the mission of God. Look around, what's God doing, and join in.
So that's an invitation to every single person who happens to be hearing those words. It's also a challenge to those in leadership in the church to say, go
Absolutely.
out and be this bridge between my words and those good people's actions.
Yeah, absolutely so. One of the important roles, I think, for the bishop, one of the important roles for the church and those in leadership in the church at every level is to equip. How can I equip disciples today to live their discipleship? What does that mean? What do they need from me and from us to enable that to happen? You know, sometimes people say, oh, well, I haven't got those skills. I'm not equipped for that. Well, God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. And we're all called. And a very important part for the church is to equip, by God's grace, those whom God is calling.
Thank you, Bishop Mark Davies, sharing some challenging thoughts about the true meaning of vocation. Now, the next conversation is actually taken from my store of past interviews, but it's one that stayed in my mind, and it's one that I think has a lot to say to us about the challenge of discovering and living out the plan that God has for each one of us. With a background in law and finance, Loretta Minghella served as Chief Executive of the Financial Services Compensation Scheme before changing her whole career to become Chief Executive of Christian Aid. And she'd just moved to that role when she visited the island in late 2010. So what could have made her give up a high-power, high-profile job and embrace not just a job change, but a whole change of values? Loretta Minghella was born on the Isle of Wight to an Italian Roman Catholic family, and as a child, going to church and joining church activities was a huge part of her life. As she got older, she felt that the church was less relevant to her, and said that, as a teenager, she felt she had no need of God. She was fine on her own, so she stopped going to church. She describes the next 20 years as her wilderness years.
Although I'd stopped going to church as a late teenager, I did miss something about it, but I wasn't quite sure what. I couldn't see myself going back to the Catholic Church, but when I went into my 30s, I was married, I had children, I started to think it might be interesting to explore again. And I thought, well, if it's not the Catholic Church, where might I belong? And I started to go to the local Anglican churches around where I lived in South London. And nothing happened, you know. I kept on trying things, but nothing happened. And I thought that maybe there wasn't anything there to find. And I'd nearly given up. And then I moved to where I live now, which is Dulwich in South London. And my daughter had a friend to stay over who went to church up the road. And her parents said, could you drop our daughter back to church in the morning, not to our house? And you can always stay if you'd like to. And my daughter said, why don't we stay, Mum, and see what it's like? And so we did. And I just had the most amazing experience, an experience of being just most profoundly welcomed and known and loved. And my life changed in that moment. I went back home and I didn't really know what to do, but I couldn't put the experience away because it was profoundly joyful. So I spent the next year, to be honest, in denial and trying to suppress it. Luckily, my daughter had none of that. She was 8 and she was very clear that this was the place she wanted to be. She said, I want to go to that church now, Mum. And I said to my husband, Olivia would like to go to the church, so I think I need to accompany her. But I was really going for myself. It just took me a whole year to own the fact that I wanted to be there for me. And, we've been going to the church together ever since. I feel so deeply grateful for that experience and for the church life and for the faith life that I now have.
So, having found a church where she truly felt that she belonged, what, I wondered, was the reaction of her atheist husband?
I think he was very puzzled and thought it might be a phase. And, I was 40 and I think he thought it might be a midlife thing. But he's a lovely person. I call him a saint, which of course he rejects. But he's a really, really lovely, principled person. And he believes very firmly that people should be able to follow their own beliefs. So he deeply respects my position, but he just doesn't choose it for himself. And he manages to live with the fact that he has this, very keen Christian now living in the house. At the beginning, I was in a kind of private love-in with this God that I'd found. And it felt like a very interior experience. I had a lot of time to make up, getting to know this God that I had so neglected, but had not neglected me. But over time, I was listening and praying, and I realised that this wasn't just about the personal or the local experience of faith. It was about the way we need to live in the world. An encounter that I was having was not with God for me, but God for everyone, for us called to be together in relationship with each other and with him. And so these social justice issues, which seemed to me to be to do with matters outside church, became very, very central for me in the way I understood my faith and what I needed to do with it. And of course that was very uncomfortable because I'd become a financial services regulatory person and a financial services lawyer. And I began to long to be able to put my faith right in the middle of my day and for it to be the whole frame of my life. But I didn't know how to do that. And I thought, this is the price I pay for the life that I've led without God, is I'm going to be stuck being a financial services lawyer forever. I will never get out of it and be able to bring God right into the middle of my life. Until, of course, over time, God made it possible for me to make some changes. 2 things happened to me in a relatively short period, 2 very, very difficult things. One personal and one professional thing. The professional thing was the banking crisis. In 2007, 8, 9, 10, I was running the Financial Services Compensation Scheme in the UK, which looks after you if your insurance company goes bust or your bank or your investment advisor or whoever. And of course, when I took the job, banks didn't really go bust. So people were saying to me, you must have quite a quiet job. And it was actually quite a busy job. We paid out £1 billion over the first 7 years of our existence, and I was part of that. But then, of course, the banking crisis hit and it became very fast and very big. And one night in 2008, I found myself borrowing £14 billion, and paying it out again almost immediately. And this was for the collapse of the Bradford and Bingley, and then transferring all its customers with this borrowed money to Santander, Abbey, then Santander. And that did 2 things for me. One, it made me think, when we see a financial crisis and we see people who need protecting, we find £14 billion on a Saturday night and we manage to borrow it and we get it out of the door again. But aren't there nearly 1 billion people in the world who don't have enough to eat? And isn't that a crisis? It just struck me as an injustice that I just couldn't really get my mind around. I don't think it was the wrong thing to do at all. I think it needed doing, but it told me something about our priorities as a world. Who do we value? And that jarred with my faith, the sense that God is for everyone, every person made in the image of God, every person of inherent dignity and infinite worth. How are we prioritising these other people? And that had been brought home to me by the other thing that I mentioned that happened earlier in the year, and that was the death of my brother, Anthony. And he was a fantastically gifted filmmaker, writer, an Oscar winner. He was really successful and very loved. We were heartbroken, obviously, as a family when he died. But it was him, the unique beauty of him that we missed. He is irreplaceable. But I learnt from his death that it is the unique beauty of the individual that's irreplaceable. And that's true of every person. So that when this incident, this Bradford and Bingley thing happened later in the year, I said, how are we valuing the unique beauty of every person? And how am I doing that with my professional life? I thought I need to change and find a way of expressing this belief that we are here to love every person for their unique beauty and dignity. I needed to make some sense out of these things that were disturbing me and change my work. And so I was absolutely thrilled when this job was advertised. And I showed it to Olivia. I said, what kind of person gets a job like that? And she said, Mum, if you don't apply, you will never know if it could be you. Well, that was a little God intervention. I did apply and I was lucky.
And that is how Loretta Minghella found a completely different vocation that led her away from high-profile, high finance and into 7 years leading the international charity Christian Aid. She is currently Master of Clare College, Cambridge. And now, as usual, we finish with a look at our notice board, starting with events and services later today. I'm looking forward to being in Ballakilferrick this afternoon for an animal blessing service starting at 3 o'clock, where we'll be giving a warm welcome to all creatures, great and small. Also at 3 o'clock this afternoon, it's the annual service organised by the Friends of Onken Heritage. It's in Abbeylands Chapel, and everyone's invited to stay on and enjoy fellowship and refreshments after the service. Also this afternoon, there's an organ concert followed by a strawberry tea in St Ninian's Church at the Glencrutchery Road traffic lights here in Douglas, and it's completely free of charge. It starts at 3:15 when accomplished musician Robert Sodor will play a concert of popular music including film scores and musicals, and this will be followed by a strawberry tea. There's plenty of easy parking around St Ninian's Church, and there's no charge for this event. 2 items of news now from the Cool Chapel. The Cool Sunday School Anniversary Service will be held this evening at 6:30, led by Mrs Jean Guthrie. The service will include items by the young people and Christine Bragazzi, with refreshments after the service. Then, this Thursday, the 18th, simple lunches will again be served in the Cool Chapel Hall. Pop in between noon and 2 p.m. for the usual delicious homemade soups and desserts, followed by tea or coffee, all for just £7. And the Cool Chapel Hall at the start of Cool Road is just across the small roundabout at the top end of the Isle of Man Business Park. Back to this evening, and at 6:30, the Mariners Choir will be at the Howe Chapel. Looking to the week ahead, and tomorrow, that's the 15th, Port St Mary Methodist Church host the Meadowside Choral Society Summer Concert. It starts at 7:30 and includes choir favourites and solos. There's a buffet afterwards with a suggested minimum donation of £5. This Wednesday, the weekly concert in St Thomas's Church here in Douglas will be given by Manx Voices, conducted by Angela Stewart, starting at the usual time of 7:45. It's free admission with refreshments afterwards and a retiring collection. And St Thomas's Church is just off Douglas Promenade, close to the Gaiety Theatre and Villa Marina complex. The Thursday evening concerts, usually held in St Catherine's Church in Port Erin, have a new venue this year due to work taking place in the church. They're being held each Thursday evening in the Erin Arts Centre, starting at 7:30. The stars of this week's concert were to have been Marlene Masker and Dilys Sowry, but unfortunately they're now not able to be there. But there will definitely be a concert this Thursday evening in the Erin Arts Centre, so pop along at 7:30 and the identity of the mystery entertainers will be revealed. As usual, admission is free with a retiring collection, and there'll be refreshments after the concert. Looking ahead now to next weekend, St Olave's Church in Ramsey are holding a garden party in the garden and the adjacent hall next Saturday, the 20th of July. St Olave's Church is on Bowering Road, just next to Ramsey Cottage Hospital. The grand opening is at 2 o'clock, and there'll be craft, cake and other stalls, games, live music, Manx dancing and lovely teas, and it'll all be there next Saturday afternoon until 6 p.m. Selby Methodist Church are holding a flower festival from next Saturday, the 20th, to Wednesday, the 24th. Open each day from 10:30 to 3:30, except next Sunday, the 21st, when it'll be open from 1:30 to 4 o'clock. There'll be musicians, Manx Wildlife Trust presentations, and, of course, refreshments. And next Sunday morning, the 21st, there's a Flower Festival Songs of Praise in Sulby Methodist Church at 10:30. And I'm afraid that's all that we have time for now. But I'll be back in our virtual lounge tonight from 9 o'clock onwards. But the easy listening music and your requests and dedications are very real, and I'd love you to join me if you can. And so, until whenever we meet again, this is Judith saying thank you for listening, and I wish you and those you love a blessed and peaceful week, and a very good morning.